Whether your advisory firm has 1 or 5 people, compliance will always be an issue. RIA Compliance Concepts is more than just another service provider. We truly care about seeing our clients prosper. That's why we started our podcast, the RIA Compliance Collective, providing up-to-date compliance guidance. We're passionate about doing our job so you can focus on doing your job. We understand regulatory compliance like the back of our hands, from full-service RIA registration to annual compliance reviews and everything in between. We're here to get you there.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the RIA Compliance Collective. I'm Megan Campbell. Today I have with me my friend and colleague Ivan Barretto. How are you doing, Ivan?
Good, Megan. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good. I know we've had a few headlines kind of hit our inboxes lately, and so I figured we would talk about that today because I know you and I have had some questions about it, and I know our clients have, so I know some of our listeners will have questions about them too. And so to start off, one of the most alarming things I think we've seen lately is a press release that came out from Redtail. So can you give our listeners some details about that?
Yeah, basically a couple of weeks ago, Redtail basically came out with a press release that informed everyone that they had a breach that affected 1% of their clients, and basically letting them know that there was a exposure of client data. And with that being said, they issued a press release to notify pretty much mostly, the clients and the regulators and whatnot. With that being said, this brings an interesting and raises some interesting questions about vendors that you use for your practice as a registered investment advisory firm. Most of our clients and most RIAs nowadays, they utilize various, software providers and vendors and to help them with their practice and practice management. With that being said, there's some concerns about, what client non-public identifying information of clients are being used by those vendors, and how do you vet that out and understand that who has that sensitive information. With that being said, when a breach does occur, or either a breach or data exposure occurs, what are some of the top things that you need to be concerned about when you have to ask those important questions? Number one, with the vendors, some of the questions you should be asking are, when did the breach occur? What data was compromised? This can be via direct conversation with them on the phone or via email. Obviously, where did it occur? Why did it happen? What to do to counter the data breach? Those are some of the various important questions you should ask. Other things that you may want to consider going forward as part of your vendor management due diligence file or risk profile, you want to create, ask questions like, does the vendor have E&O insurance? Does the vendor have cybersecurity insurance? Do they have an internal cybersecurity policies and procedures? Basically, just understanding how well they are attuned to this concern about cybersecurity breaches and so forth. Now, as far as other things to consider, you may want to consider established security requirements for your vendors, determining and verifying if the vendors have a viable security program, ensure there's vendor contracts to support the firm's security goals, and if they have a breach notification procedures and action plan. Now, a lot of things that, some of the vendors that you utilize and the firm itself has to understand that all of the states have a requirement now that if you are breached, you have to, and some are time specific, that if you are breached, there's requirements to report the breach to the individuals as well as the regulators in a certain timetable. For example, I'm just going to use Colorado. In Colorado, if you have a breach, depending on the size and scope of the breach, you must report it to the individuals in the most reasonable time possible or expedient time possible without any unreasonable delay, but no later than 30 days after the date that you've determined that there was a security breach that occurred. As well as the regulators. Now, if you had a breach where it affected more than 500 Colorado residents and so forth, you must provide notice to the Attorney General in the most expedient time possible, but no later than 30 days from the date of determination of the security breach. So these are things that you have to consider when there is a breach by your vendor, as well as a breach that occurs internally, that some states have requirements that you have to report these things to the individuals that were affected as well as the regulators with a certain time parameter. And you have to be aware of that nowadays. But with that being said, I mean, it's not a very good situation when your vendors get breached, but you definitely want to ask the right questions and have the right risk profile or due diligence profile in place to have that information handy if that were ever to occur in the future for other vendors.
Right. And to know what your exposure is, what your client's exposure is. Because, everybody's, it's hard to do business these days without any sort of vendor or third party that's using the cloud or using your client's information or has their information.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I know this kind of a breach, it brings to light how important it is to have, good cybersecurity protocols, good compliance procedures on notifying your clients. So it kind of brings those to light in a all too real world situation. So hopefully it's a good lesson learned, I guess you could say, for everybody that they'll be more aware of those kind of things.
Yep, exactly.
And so I'm going to switch gears just a little bit. I'm going from the scary kind of situation where, you have a data breach to something that was put out recently by NASAA, FINRA, and the SEC. The Senior Safe Act was signed into law a little over a year ago in May of 2018. And to mark the anniversary of that and to bring awareness to it, NASAA, the SEC, and FINRA sent out this fact sheet about the Senior Safe Act to kind of remind BDs and IAs of the protections that the Senior Safe Act affords them under the Act. So prior to this Act being put into law, if you're a BD or IA and you have a senior client that you think they were subjected to some financial exploitation, and you went to report that suspected exploitation, then you could open yourself up and your company up to litigation for violating that client's privacy. So what the Senior Safe Act did and does is it provides a layer of protection and immunity from those privacy requirements if you make those kind of reports in an effort to protect your clients. So it's a good thing. And so the SEC and FINRA and NASAA, they kind of wanted to put this fact sheet out there to kind of outline what the conditions are so that you know how you can protect yourself, how you can protect your firm, because all in all, it's about protecting your client's best interest, right? And so what that fact sheet does, it's very concise. It's 3 pages and basically answers the FAQs that you might have about what is covered under the Senior Safe Act. So who is covered, how you might be covered, what are the books and records requirements, as well as some links to additional resources. And so as far as who is covered, basically anyone that is with an investment advisor or broker dealer that is a legal or a compliance employee, or if they're a registered rep, an investment advisor representative, or an insurance producer. And in order to give yourself that immunity from the privacy requirements, you just have to meet 2 conditions. And those are that the individuals receive training on how to properly detect and report possible exploitation of senior clients. And then the second condition is that any report that's made of the suspected exploitation is to an approved agency, and it has to be done in good faith with reasonable care. So you can't just tell whichever agency you want any information you want about this. So it's pretty specific in that. But one thing that the Act doesn't do is it doesn't actually mandate the training. It's just telling people, hey, if you want this level of protection, that you're going to have to go through some training. You'll have to document the training. It'll have to tell you kind of what are the red flags. It has to be in line with what your duties are as, an investment advisor rep, for example, all of those kind of things. So it's pretty straightforward, pretty common sense stuff, but just kind of puts it in law so that, you can provide protection for yourself and your firm.
And that's something that we can assist with. We offer senior vulnerability financial exploitation training that can basically help, RIAs or financial professionals meet that requirement to help them get the immunity requirement or satisfy one of the criteria for immunity for reporting it. So with that being said, this is something that's definitely an area, and this act is very important because the population, and like I mentioned in previous podcasts about this topic, the population is aging out, and this is definitely going to be a very important and hot topic issue for a lot of financial professionals to deal with their clients that are starting to become senior vulnerable clients that could potentially be exploited.
Absolutely.
So this is definitely a great direction to protect those types of clients.
Absolutely. And I think this in conjunction with this, a lot of the states now have enacted legislation that requires investment advisors and broker dealers to make this kind of report, and it gives you some leeway in maybe holding off on transactions and what you need to do. So I think that those state legislation in conjunction with the Senior Safe Act, it helps investment advisors do their job a little bit better. Because like you said, that the population is aging out, and I know I would highly recommend anyone that's more interested in knowing more about senior vulnerability to definitely listen to our podcast regarding it, because there's some really interesting facts. And I bet you could probably ask anybody and they have a story about someone that was subjected to some sort of financial exploitation. I know I have family members that were exploited. I know Collin, one of our consultants, he's had a family member that was exploited. So it's a topic that definitely hits close to home.
Exactly. So with that being said, I think that's pretty much it, what we wanted to cover today. I just want to let everyone know that we are, with the recent SEC best interest ruling last week, we will be doing a podcast to cover that, as well as the Form CRS in the near future. So stay tuned to future podcasts. And Megan, I think that we're good to go.
Yeah, I think so. And we definitely like to have our podcast to be concise, and the best interest and Form CRS information is there's a lot of information in there. So we definitely wanted to have our own podcast for it. But what we're going to do, we'll have in our show notes, we'll have links to the Senior Safe Act fact sheet. We'll have links to the press release we discussed earlier. And we'll also put in some links to those prior podcasts that were related to cybersecurity and senior vulnerability, so that if you're interested in those, you can have a direct link to those. Otherwise, we want to thank you all for joining us today, and hope you join us next time on the RIA Compliance Collective. Until next time, we're here to get you there.
Thank you for listening to the RIA Compliance Collective. Your support is greatly appreciated. If you want to experience the RIA Compliance Concepts difference yourself, visit RIACC.io. From mock audits to customized compliance procedures, ongoing compliance assistance, and beyond, we're here for you always. Keep listening to discover more on how you can keep your advisory firm compliant so you can focus on achieving your goals. RIA Compliance Concepts. We're here to get you there.